you don't even have to present a good alternative. You just have to have it either have been bad or undermine it really well.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. This is another week in humanity. How you doing, Rog?
Good man. Yeah, humanity's feeling strong.
Hey, so today we're going to be just doing a little bit of chatting about democracy. So we thought it'd be a bit fun. I don't know if you know this, Rog, but nearly half the world's population this year will actually be voting for their national leaders. So we thought it'd be an
Oh
interesting one
wow.
to
So
sit down and chat.
where is that? There's obviously America, India. Do we have one? Does Australia have one?
No, I don't think. No, I think that's next year.
No. Okay.
And then you've got like Azerbaijan, Pakistan.
Oh nice. Yeah.
There's
What about South Africa? Nigeria?
Yeah, South Africa, but South Africa are like Australia. They don't announce when the election is going to happen until
Oh
quite
yeah.
later.
It's gonna happen. Yeah, exactly. Don't worry.
House
It's on
of
its
Commons
way.
is up for election again, which is
Yep,
crazy
good.
that it's been 5 years since the last election. I just can't. That blows my mind.
The British politics is very strange now. Like basically since that like turn in the mid 2010s, like it's
Yeah,
just this postmodern nightmare of falling apart and no one knowing what the hell is going on and selling the
oh,
whole thing for parts, basically, I think.
yeah, pretty much. Scotland should go out and it's
There's the EU as well,
yeah,
upvoting as well, that's a good chunk of it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
And I have
If
a
you ask
feeling
them, it's all of the Western
Russia might
world.
be going to an election as well.
Who's this?
Russia, I think, might have an election
Oh
as
yeah.
well
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense.
because Vladimir
That
Putin
makes
is
sense.
elected.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah.
So I thought, given our bent on technology, this might be an interesting time for us to talk a little bit. But one of the things that I'm super interested in, and I know that you're super interested in as well, is the psychological factors around voting choice. And I've been asked this question quite a few times around what actually drives people towards voting choice and how they actually make decisions. And so I thought it'd be fun today for us to spend a bit of time talking about, at the kind of politics level, what actually drives choice, but then also the psychological level, as well as then
definitely.
talking a little bit more about social media, which is obviously the one in recent years that everyone kind of seems to feel is the
That's
big
the change, right?
yeah.
That's
And of
the
course, then you've also
disruptor.
got Taylor Swift, who apparently is going to decide the US election, if you believe the media.
Yeah, possibly if she votes Republican, because she's a billionaire now. Like it would be foolhardy of her to not. I'm not sure. The Republican Party in America is like it's gone so far that it's just a crazy place to be right now. Their base is mostly just hyper conservative people that, as you mentioned last week, no longer. It's not that they don't want change anymore. They do want change. They want reversion. They are very excited. Instead of being conservative, now they're looking forward to things changing, but changing to something that they perceive that they already had and that they've lost, which is the power of that like incredible grasping at nostalgia, especially because of technology, how much over the past 10, 15 years, like we were saying last week, some of the people who are now moving into and past retirement grew up with black and white or no TV, right? And now the amount of technology that has exploded exponentially over the past 10 years, you can definitely see why that in part is make them wonder about how things could have been different, and if we can get back to a semblance of that idealized past that we had.
Yeah. Right. So I thought it'd be fun exercise at the start for you and anyone who might be watching.
Yeah.
So there's some research by a guy named Waipot Kulachai. It came out a few years ago, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh no, actually it came out last year. Sorry, I did take that back.
Yeah.
And essentially in their research, this team have identified a series of individual level factors as well as then socio-cultural factors that impact a person's voting choice. And what I thought would be fun, firstly, is there's 9 individual factors. So see if you can figure out what they are.
Individual. I'm not sure. I suppose your education level,
Yep, education is one of them.
your socioeconomic standing.
I
Is that made up
think
of a couple of different things, maybe?
think that might be socio-cultural level. I think that's larger.
Sociocultural. Okay, yeah, all right. One's got to be geographic, whether you're metropolitan or rural,
Oh
definitely.
no, sorry, income. Income is one, so we call
Income.
income
Okay, all right. And then
economic.
sociocultural's a different one.
They're like broader macro level ones.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
There's two really obvious ones that you'll
gender.
Of
Gender and
course,
age.
yeah. Gender and age, obviously, yeah.
Nice.
So that's four
Good
of them.
one. Good one.
This next one's a little bit of a sneaky one, which is like it's like using the word in the definition of the word type of thing.
Oh, okay.
It's literally just political ideology. Like,
oh, nice. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. How
you can't really use that, but
your political ideology is going to be a big part of your makeup of how you ideologize politically. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. Nice. What are the last couple of personal factors?
You've got personality traits.
Oh, nice. So, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And which paradigm do they go within that? Is that the extroversion, introversion? That
yeah, kind of. So it's openness to experiences.
Yeah.
So people who are more open tend to support progressive policies.
Yeah.
Your conscientiousness, self-discipline, organization, and traditionality, I think. So
yeah. Nice.
Oh, and empathy. So
okay. Well, yeah, that is. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you've got
what were the others? The other were. Yep.
Climate change concern. That's a big one. That's quite interesting.
That's really, it is, right? Because are these factors now just sort of pointing to, are they issue based almost? Because that's clearly like an issue, right?
Marketing would call something like that a hygiene factor, where it's one of those things where you're not on the right side of the fence. You they won't even open up to think about you.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. Yeah.
I think that's probably what it is there's probably a contingent of, say, 15-20% of the population who just will not even
just need to tick the box. Yeah.
Which makes sense, because if you look at the various Greens parties around the world, they're built off that issue, and they typically have somewhere between 14 and 25% vote rates.
Exactly. Well, and that's even within the naming of the party, and I assume a lot of them started like that was the alternative, you know. Very
and the final one is health experiences.
Health experiences?
Healthcare. Which makes sense in Australia or England, because
definitely.
The vast bulk of places have private health.
Yeah, well, it is interesting as well, because we sort of have seen in that sector the last 15 years a big move, and there's obviously GP funding going up and down is a really big thing, because some people are finding it now difficult to get bulk billed. You know,
which is
that's
a specific thing, but
no, exactly. But that's something that's sort of changing, and ideally it wouldn't go that way. Just from a personal point of view, that we would make it easier for people to access affordable healthcare, but you know, that's political, and that's the market. That's what people want.
The quality of the NHS is becoming a huge voting bloc issue.
It has, especially in that money. And I remember for Brexit, there was a very clever of blaming immigration, and the money that was spent on immigration. They had a figure, and they said this is what's been taken from the NHS and given to immigration, and that was a very clever sticking block, because that's a false equivalency, right? Like they're not they're not the baskets that they've decided. They're like, oh, sorry, we need to work on border policy.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you believe, but there's quite a few people in the UK actually say it was an out-and-out lie, like just straight up that money never actually even existed. So
I did assume that was the case. I remember, because that was the post-UKIP Farage Brexit, and that's basically when it fell apart. I think.
Yeah.
If it was ever together.
So sociocultural factors. See if you can
See, that's what I thought. I thought religion would fit into this one, but because I'm not exactly sure where the line between personal and social culture.
So religion, religion is one of them.
Mm-hmm. I guess community connectedness, is that like, how do you say that? Like how,
social networks.
So, okay, yeah. Okay,
yeah, I'd say that's right. Yeah,
for sure.
They've talked about it in terms of platforms, but I think it might go deeper than that because I haven't actually.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like community was the original social platform. We just stood all on the ground. Like that was the platform.
But it does go back to the point you and I spoke about last week about how neo-tribes now align more closely to like digital communities rather than
exactly. And especially when you get to the fringes where you not recently, not since Twitter migrated to its new way of working under its new leadership, but before that, where there were people being told that they couldn't, and there were certain things you couldn't talk about on there, especially if you're on the fringes of the right. There were a lot of people being deplatformed, so then you ended up with alternative platforms springing up, and when they're based ideologically as well, you basically are radicalized by the time you get there. They have exclusively one set of values within those platforms.
Yeah, they also have another category called social identity, which seems to then align with more the like social groups at a physical level. I think what we're talking about probably combines those two categories.
Yeah, exactly.
We also have another two super obvious ones in there as well.
Super obvious ones, like not nationality, but like
ethnicity,
immigration status. Yeah, ethnicity.
No, ethnicity.
Yeah, totally.
And then
the other one.
Actually, see if you can get the next one. The next one's very relevant to you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Men with beards, education status,
media,
people who were in the media. Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay.
Media influence. Yeah.
And then they've
got another category which is political influences as well.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. I was only having a conversation the other day with a political journalist friend of mine, and was bringing back the elements of what's it called, manufacturing consent, right? And that if you're a political journalist that doesn't operate within the paradigm that you're presented with, you have your access cut off. And so how much do those two things inform each other? And especially having worked in Australian political journalism before, like those corridors of power, they share a wall. At the very least, they share a wall,
Yeah. And in places like Canberra and Washington, D.C. are the same.
Exactly, man.
You're all going to the same place, networking with the same
that's
people.
The thing. As soon as you're part of those, because Canberra in particular, and possibly just because I'm more familiar with it rather than Washington, but we built a city exclusively for the legislators and politicians of the land. And then I don't know if there was a long-term plan for that, and if it was theorized that maybe they would just have one rule for them and their ivory towers and their green power and their smoking weed and all of those sorts of things, and then everyone else can sort of just deal with the rule of the many.
Apparently, I don't know if this is true, but apparently it's all started with a bunch of people just throwing their toys out of the pram, and like Melbourne being like, we want all the center of power in Melbourne, and Sydney saying we want all power. And so they
that's exactly what it is.
Well, we'll all just hang out together in the middle of it all, and then none of the poor people.
Exactly. Yeah, 100% away from anyone that we have to govern for. Yeah, exactly. Which is it's so fascinating that having no adults in the room, or like sort of, what is it, like that's even tribalism, like that's not nationalism, but like cityism, being like no whether it's us, and the other guy's being like no, it's us. So neither of us
jobs like mine is so important, because if you are living in an ivory tower or a bubble like that, getting the voice of the community into your decision making is extraordinarily difficult, and that's why people like
exactly, and
basically social engineers and social architects go out to actually get all that feedback and bring it back in a coherent way that can be digested easily. Because otherwise, when it comes voting time, you can be completely
exactly. Your polls are nowhere near what's going to happen. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
that's such an important point. And it's fascinating in a way that they it's not actually important to care for the community and know what they feel, but if you don't know what they feel and what they care about, you can't maintain your power.
yeah,
You can't
yeah,
you can't maintain your
yeah.
status quo.
So
But
what I want to,
a good thing for a bad reason, like sometimes that's the best you can hope for. A good
yeah,
result for a dubious reason.
yeah. Yeah. One thing I did want to call out as well is that, so we've just spoken about what are the determinants at an individual or at the personal level that decide your
Yeah.
vote. But there's
Hmm.
obviously the complete other side of the coin is what delivers a good campaign, or what features of a good campaign or a good leadership period, because obviously, like
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
already been campaigning for however long,
Exactly, and that's
you've actually
often
been
what the incumbent is, and there always is that fascinating thing of that the incumbent is usually uh, chosen for what they've done just previously, whereas an opposition really just has to. You don't even have to present a good alternative. You just have to have it either have been bad or undermine it really well, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
I think in an ideal world, if I ran a political party, I would just love to be the opposition all the time. If you didn't care about the community or
yeah.
your society or country,
Well,
because
it's like
that's a
like
great gig, man. That is a great
yeah,
gig. The villain
yeah.
is that's a plum gig.
Well, it's also, if you are a good orator, it's extremely easy to do as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Like,
Imagine having to be against like I don't know, like any of them because they're all like even the guys that you think are drop kicks. You see them in Parliament, and the guys up the top just tear each other to shreds. Like
oh yeah,
that's dude. That yeah. It is ferocious and
yeah. Some of Paul Keating's
yeah.
speeches back in the day, like
That's who I was gonna mention because
honestly,
I
like
started
you listen
saying,
to some of the things
imagine
he,
fighting Paul Keating. Yeah,
it
imagine
was
going
so
up against
like,
him.
but I
But
tell you
then
who else,
even
people
since
don't like
then,
to give him credit for this, but actually, legitimately, Donald Trump is
yeah, well,
very
dude,
good at
he
that.
was the second person I was going to say because he's a great bully, man. That's how he made his way in there the first time.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah,
charismatic, rich bully. Like that
yeah.
is,
But he's
and
also a
even
funny. This is like people don't like to
he's
admit
good.
it.
He's a good bully. He's a
Yeah,
good bully.
yeah,
That's the thing. Like
yeah,
no one who's a shitty bully, mind my language, pardon the expression, but no one who is a poor level bully ever gets that much of a following. But if you're a funny bully, if you're good at it, and I think that
mm,
is a key part of it,
yeah,
people will line up not only because it's amazingly entertaining, but because they don't want to be on the receiving end of your teeth.
yeah, yeah. So on that note, so generally speaking, there's kind of four main frames that are used to draw, or that a good campaign is judged by, and
Yeah. Okay.
so and these are by and large it's Britain, America, and the US, sorry, and Australia that I'm formulating this
Yeah. Yeah.
view on.
Just the Five Eyes, the 5 points of the West, because Canada and New Zealand run pretty
Yeah,
well the same way.
exactly. Yeah, they're the same. So you've got
Yeah.
firstly is
Yeah.
domestic policy, but specifically generally focusing around health and the local economy.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
You've then got foreign policy, specifically focusing around security or security of the
Defense,
border.
and immigration. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, defense, and then yes, immigration is the next one.
Yeah.
And immigration tends to be seen. It's either considered to be a defense issue or in line with what we would expect, trade. And so
Yeah.
that has a
Exactly.
very big
Yeah. Yeah.
focus. So that's
Yeah.
economic domestic is more about do we have jobs? Economic
Yeah.
foreign is more about is trade going well and what are the prices of goods at the shelves
Yeah.
like?
And I suppose immigration can fit in under either of those, whether you view it as yeah through its costs and benefits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the
Yeah.
third one
Interesting.
is rhetoric. So basically, how do
Okay.
you
Yeah.
when you appear, so on and
Yeah.
so forth.
How do you get across those policies, and are people paying attention? Because you can have the best message in the world, but if no one's listening, it's not going to do you much good.
Yeah, but it's also, do you have yes, you can have a great message, but if you don't deliver it effectively in your rhetoric,
oh, okay, yeah, fair enough.
It's very hard. So, like, for example, if you look at the 2016 campaigns for Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, actually a lot of the messaging they had in terms of problem identification and even in certain circumstances, solutions, like getting rid of the transatlantic, Trans-Pacific Partnership, is that what it was called? TPP?
Yeah, TPP.
TPP. They, both of them were heavily anti that trade deal. If you look at Sanders, yes, he did very well, but he never managed to take it to the next level, whereas Donald Trump did. And if you look at their rhetorical capabilities, like you said, Donald Trump is a very funny, very charming bully. And so that's a very big component of, if you get your rhetoric right, you can actually then...
exactly. Well, that's the thing, because I do wonder about how... Because obviously your policies can't be terrible. It's very hard to run on an empty platform. But depending on how good your rhetoric is, that can be of a less quality, less thought out, less brought across, because...
Well, look at the 2000 and... What election was it where Bill Shorten and ScoMo went up against?
14. Was it 14 or 18?
No, I feel like it was... I can't remember. I feel like it was later than that. But when they went up against one another, like, you look at the policy platform of Shorten, it objectively was more beneficial to more people.
It was such a good, that was basically, I think that's when the modern Labour Party died. Because they took, especially the franking credits, especially the trying to fix housing and the basically just the sit on piles of money in empty boxes sort of thing. They tried to take it on, they lost, and they really thought that was the platform. They're like, these are the solutions to the problems we have. Vote for us and we'll do it. Then they lost, and then they're like, well, we don't know. Tell us what you want. We're just going to do what they do, okay? If that's what you want. And now they're, I'd be surprised if they don't win the next one, because really the Liberal Party has lost the...
Well, but this was
got one person in their top 10 team from 5 years ago.
Yeah, and Scott Morrison's party, and I'm not giving away my voting preferences here, because I'm literally not endorsing Liberals. I'm literally saying that the media at the time, as well as political commentators and analysts, were legitimately saying it's going to be very hard for the Liberals to win here because they don't have a policy agenda. And
even that, because they just passed a massive raft of taxes and also expenditure in that budget just before, the budget that they pushed through before the election, because it was intended to be a poison pill, right? It was like basically a wish list of things that they could spend money on, because they thought they were about to leave it on Labor, and then they sort of had to, and they themselves, they didn't think they were going to win, and they didn't really want to, I don't think, because this is the other thing, you can only be in power for so long before it sort of drags on you, I think.
Right, naturally
it drags on the party. Yeah, exactly.
And people want to change. That's the thing. At least once a decade, the public want to feel something different.
I think that's one of the biggest problems with a two-party system, with a 4-year term limit, all these sorts of things sort of, and they are to prevent bigger problems, definitely, don't get me wrong. But they were brought in as solutions to other things.
Of course, everything has its problems. These ones just have specific problems.
Yeah, exactly. And they've been around long enough that in some cases those problems feel like they outweigh. Also, because it's like that preventative measure thing. You're like, we're not, we can go outside, we fixed all this stuff. And you're like, no, that's because we had all these preventative measures. When preventative measures work, you don't know about it, It's that same sort of thing, because we haven't seen the problems that these were brought in to address so long ago. It's not an issue for us,
Yeah. So the last thing I think is really interesting right now is the effects of social media. And obviously, since about was Barack Obama's second campaign, it was 2012, wasn't it? So
that
he
won 2008 and then 12.
Yeah, 2012 is really where the impact of social media is accepted to be material on an election cycle.
12, exactly, because that's when we were saying the other day that 12, 13 is about when the bulk of society, and especially people in that 45 to 60-year-old bracket, reached social networks, reached social platforms.
So we've assumed, most political commentators have assumed since that time, that social media and technology is the single biggest impactor on voter choice and on voter decision making. And what I thought was really interesting is last year in July, there was a study released by a guy named Thomas Fujiwara with two other researchers. And they used logarithms to control for basically that 2012, 2013, and 14 period in the US specifically. Where you would have expected this explosion to occur. And then once they've controlled for that, they've looked at the statistical significance of the effect of social media, specifically looking at Twitter. So they're not looking at Facebook because there's obviously
all right.
Now, what they found is that there is a very, very limited statistical impact on voting choice. And more than that, the statistical impact on voting choice actually is more aligned to left-leaning parties, and by this I mean the Democrats, than it is towards the Republicans, which obviously a lot of people claim that Donald Trump's
exactly right. You expect that, you don't, and this is also, I think, a bit of a loaded thing where we think of the alt-right and the new right and stuff without ever talking about alt-left or new left, which is a massive thing, which is a massive wave of the last 10 years, holy crap. It is.
Well, I remember listening to a really good
piece. Very real.
Yeah, exactly, the culture wars. But I remember listening to a really interesting piece by Fareed Zakaria a couple of years ago, where he spoke about the fact that if you actually look at the voting dynamics and the political dynamics in the US, they've actually moved heavily away from the concept of left versus right and more to globalist versus insularist. And
isn't that interesting?
That's actually a much more accurate way of looking at voting tendencies in the US nowadays, which I think is probably very fair.
I think that's probably across most nations now, and I think that's probably just because we're now on the not tail end, but we're very globalized, from the 70s onward, I guess, and then accelerated by the internet and obviously all the things that come alongside of it, connecting everyone together. I would say that in most countries, because I know a lot of the European new right people, especially the ones who are winning, are putting that forward, that they're anti-globalist, which to me it's just a repackaging of xenophobic in-group out-group stuff. Not that is not an issue for a lot of countries, or any country. It's something you have to weigh, but that's what it is. It's the big they. That's what the globalists are, right? You hear it whenever you hear global elite, whenever you hear any of those phrases. But that's fascinating. So that is, rather than right and left. So, and then within what was the traditional right and left, you have insularist and globalized factions that people move towards or against.
Yeah, I think it's more if you think about it as one spectrum of at this far end, where you're very open to globalism and more than that, and you can look at it at a cultural level, open to additional cultural influences.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you've got closedness. I think what he's saying is that you very similar to what the right and left used to be, is kind of typically speaking, that's the best way.
All right.
Is on that spectrum. And
it is interesting as well that the progressive and conservative and what those words what they used to mean and what they've ceased to mean as well, alongside right and left, because it used to sort of be like this, then it was like this, and now it's not really anything.
Well, a lot of people in the US talk about a uniparty nowadays, and I think you could argue, a fairly similar dynamic in Australia from a policy perspective. There's very little.
Yeah.
So before we wrap it up, tell me what you think about the social media thing. Tell me what you reckon about these
That's fascinating. I could talk about it for ages. I wonder, first of all, because it was based just on Twitter, and I always wonder about the dynamic on Twitter and what psychographically who was on there, especially early, because 2010 to 13, there were only very sort of specific people on Twitter, I think, really. There were people who wanted to connect with celebrities. There was a lot of journalists, and then they also started to be companies and figureheads. And that's when we also started to see that great transition of brands being people and people being brands. And I that's one of the most fascinatingly terrible things that's ever happened, you know. But I wonder if first of all, I wonder how wide a spectrum the groups that were on Twitter were. And I also wonder that the people who sought it out were perhaps people who were already quite entrenched within which side they were on. Because this is the other thing within our two-party political system. Like, you have to, it's a big swing to get you to go the other way, you know, like, unless you're in the middle.
You're
unless
already an existing voter.
Exactly, right. Exactly. That's why, and that's why they're always like trying to get the kids.
I reckon this election, there'll be only 3 states will be material in any way, shape, or form.
Isn't it fantastic? It's such once again, the theater of the absurd. You're like, guys, out of 320 million of us, it's going to come down to like 3, like, because voter turnout isn't going to be huge. Like, it's never huge. Like, they don't. I'm not crazy on it. I think it's a little bit fascist to force your people into engaging with politics. But at least we all vote. At least we all vote. You know, it might be between a douche and a turd or whatever the pejorative is, but at least
you don't have to vote. You have to show up to tick your name.
Exactly. That's true. That's true. That's as engaged as you got to be. You got to be bureaucratically engaged, even if you're not politically engaged. That Twitter thing.
I understand what you're saying. I definitely wouldn't use the term fascist to describe it, because it's actually.
Yeah, it's big government. It's big government. So, you know, which is good. Like, there's definitely things that they should be involved in our life. But that's the main 2 things that I think of, is who are the people who were on Twitter during that. Because as soon as you told me about the study, I'm like, that's fascinating. It doesn't have a lot of swing on it. I think it being Twitter, and especially early of last decade, is interesting, because I think most of the people there would already be on their side.
Engaged,
And the other thing is that there are only 2. And so, like, because that's the thing in Europe, where you have like 7 or 8 parties, like to get your vote from one of the others, like the Social Democrats to the Democratic Socialists, you know, like it's, and that's, and when things like that, you're like, your platform and all those factors mean so much more. Like, your rhetoric, it can take you from being like 6th or 7th out of 9 parties to forming minor government, you know. But I think you'd probably find it a lot more in those sort of scenarios, would be a lot more of a swing.
We better wrap it up, Rog.
It's been good, man. We do get a bit carried away, but very interesting. It's a interesting study. You'll have to send it and pop it in the link at the bottom.
We'll put the link in. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
No worries. Take care of your humanity this week, guys. See you again.